Here we go again. Another night shift at the nursing home. I already drank 2 cups of coffee and I wanted to desperately go to bed. If only I did not come so late on Monday, the head nurse would not give me this night shift and I would be in bed now, watching New Girl and not complain about having a night shift. My eyelids were heavy and my head felt like an anchor stuck in the air. Somehow the laws of gravity didn't apply to it though. Not because they didn't exist, mostly because I resisted them. I spun around in the chair I was sitting in and closed my eyes for a minute, forgetting I was in the nurse's office with those dreary, beige curtains on the windows while the rain was gently falling on the glass, putting me to sleep. While I was thinking about not being home in my bed next to my already asleep boyfriend. But that didn't last very long. The alarm in the room 125 went off. That was Mr. Kowalski's room. You got to be careful at nursing homes. Somebody's always trying to die on you, especially during this time of year. It was February and almost the end of winter. Death loved visiting my patients, often during these dark and cold times. As if some of them were not strong enough to make it through it or not ready for another spring to do it all over again. Whatever it means. This month we have already cleared 3 rooms. The presence of death could be felt immensely in the blank and silent corridors of this old building. The darkness outside only made things worse. The nights were still long and unbearably cold. When I studied to be a nurse and worked at the hospital in the geriatric wing, we mostly only had to be there during the day. And if I was there during the night, I always had an older nurse with me, guiding me through the night shift. But now I was a full-fledged nurse myself and I had to make it on my own. So I got up and put my big girl pants on. I quickly ran towards Mr. Kowalski's room and turned on the light so I can see better. We always turn off the lights. We only let them on if someone really needs them. "Turn off the goddamn light, nurse! I am blind enough," Mr. Kowalski said, and then he added something Polish, something I did not understand. He probably just insulted me, as he loved practicing his Polish. He liked the nice Slavic sisters who worked with us because they understood a bit of his mother tongue. That was not my case, however. I turned off the light and turned on a nightstand lamp on his desk. "Well, what do you need, Mr. Kowalski? It's pretty late," I said, tiredly rolling my eyes. He was fine, not an emergency. "I have to call someone," he said and winked at me. I knew what that meant. All sisters knew what it meant. Mr. Kowalski liked to use the expression "I have to call someone" as a codename for "I have to go to the bathroom." Mr. Kowalski was actually a very big gentleman. I've never heard him curse, at least not in English, and he always greeted everyone warmly, taking the hat off whenever a woman passed by in his wheelchair. I don't know if he wanted to score extra brownie points or whatnot, but it did work. He always wore that hat, mostly to cover up his bald head, which he was very sensitive about. A very sweet old man, but his bones weren't always that sweet. 2 months ago, he broke his right leg. Now he just sat in his wheelchair and couldn't walk. His doctor prescribed him physical therapy, but Mr. Kowalski had no interest in taking part in it. I helped him in his wheelchair and took him to the bathroom. When I wanted to put him on the toilet, there was already a gift for me in his pants. "I am so sorry, nurse," he said. I was so tired and I did not feel like washing his ass right now. Why couldn't he just keep it in? When did he do it? Before I got him in the wheelchair or after? Shit. "It's fine," I said, trying to hide my frustration. I walked around him to get some rubber gloves from the medicine cabinet. Then I saw his eyes. They were full of shame and disgust for himself. He was embarrassed and very angry with himself. I felt terrible. It was not his fault. The man was 89 years old. This was more uncomfortable for me than for him. I was a professional asshole wiper, cleaning shit in this nursing home for 4 months now, and before that in my nursing school. It was my job and duty. I can go to the bathroom myself. I don't need a 24-year-old cow to assist me. It doesn't matter, Mr. Kowalski. Do you fancy a midnight shower? I'll sing something to you. I tried cheering him up a bit, because he really liked my singing. Oh, do you know Bayu Bayu Bainki? He asked. It was probably something Polish, but I didn't speak Polish, nor did I know Polish songs. No, unfortunately not, Mr. Kowalski. My mom sang it to me. He said it with a somber yet nostalgic upbeat voice. Well then, do you know, Hush Little Baby Don't Say a Word? Who doesn't know that one? I thought to myself. It was a notch upsetting. He wanted me to sing him a lullaby for infants, but I've seen so many old people turn to children. Stuff like this didn't rock my jimmies too hard anymore. My grandpa used to sing it to me as well whenever I would show up at his house and fall asleep next to him on the couch watching movies together. Well, that was before he forgot who I was and didn't let me close to him thinking I was an intruder. Yeah, sure, I said and started singing to Mr. Kowalski. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring. And if that diamond ring turns brass, Mama's gonna buy you a looking glass. And if that looking glass is broke, Mama's gonna buy you a billy goat. And if that billy goat won't pull, Mama's gonna buy you a garden bowl. And if that garden bowl turn over, Mama's gonna buy you a dog named Rover. And if that dog named Rover won't bark, Mama's gonna buy you a horse and a cart. And if that horse and cart fall down, you'll still be the sweetest little baby in town. Finally, I put Mr. Kowalski to bed after showering him and changing him into a different pajama. It took me half an hour to get him to bed. Then I left Mr. Kowalski's room because I needed coffee again. I still had to endure 5 more hours. When I walked outside of Mr. Kowalski's room, the hallway fell into darkness for just a second. For a brief moment, I almost shit my pants. But then the lights came back on, flickering for another few seconds. Then it stopped. I could hear the buzzing of the neon lights above me. That and the silence. I hated the idea of walking back to the nurse's office without light. Maybe a quick blackout? I better call the electrician department when I get back, I thought to myself, just in case. On my way back, I passed room 124. It was right next to Mr. Kowalski's room, the room of Mrs. Stein. I gently opened the door to check on her, as the doctor requested. She was talking to herself. Again. Sleep, Mrs. Stein. It's too late, I said. Usually it was enough to send her to bed. My hand was placed on the door handle while waiting for the mumbling to be exchanged by silence. I didn't peek in, as I didn't want to turn on the light and disturb her. Also, I hated the darkness. It scared me to death. After a few seconds, it was quiet again. I closed the door and went to get my coffee. Mrs. Stein was an old widow who lived at the nursing home for more than 9 years now. She was my favorite patient because she was so nice and kind to me. When I got here, she was my first patient I took care of. We bonded quite soon and gossiped about the other nurses, other staff, and patients. My attention made her happy, as she wasn't getting much from her family that would maybe visit her every other month, which wasn't that bad, I guess. There were people here that haven't seen their families for months, if not years. She liked talking about her husband Albert, who died 10 years ago. Mrs. Stein had his photo on her bedside table, kissing it goodnight before she would go to bed every single night. This one time, she told me he would sometimes come visit her during the night and they would talk. Mrs. Stein had dementia. People with dementia say crazy things. My colleague Sasha came into the office. She was a stereotypical white girl with blonde hair and the worst case of low-waist jeans I have ever seen. But she was fun to be around, and she made a mean cup of coffee, which I already helped myself to. She also got one. Tonight this place only belonged to the two of us. Usually Nurse Robert would be here with us at this time of day, but she got sick. With 20 years of experience, she was the veteran that has seen it all. Her absence made me and Sasha nervous during this rainy night. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Sasha addressed me. The gentle rain outside was slowly transforming into a storm. The branches of the tree right before the nurse's office window was hitting the glass. The wind was cradling it in the rhythm of the rain. "Nothing new. Mr. Kowalski had to call someone," I said, and finally collapsed on the old leather couch that must have been in the nurse's office for millennia. "Is Stein already asleep?" she asked me, closing the door. "Why? I checked on her," I said as her question surprised me. Maybe she didn't go to bed. "Is she still awake?" I asked. "I think not. I just want to make sure she sleeps well tonight." She sat behind the office desk with her coffee cup and blew into it, trying to make it colder. "Why? Didn't she sleep well yesterday?" I asked, frowning my forehead. She looked at me for a long time, as if I had said something incorrect. "She didn't sleep at all this week, sweetheart." She finally spoke up. "I always find her sitting in her bed and looking into the corner of her room. The first time it really scared me." "Well, you can't be sure if she's not sleeping," I begged to differ. "Maybe she's waking up early." "Stein, waking up early? We used to have problems getting her out of bed." So she did have a point. "I'm only here for 4 months. You know better. Did you do something about it?" "Yes, I told the doctor. She prescribed her sleeping pills, and I make sure she takes them for the last 5 days. She takes the pills, and then she talks to herself in the middle of the night? How is that possible? The stuff should numb her, so she should sleep like a baby." "I don't know, maybe she's not swallowing them," I said, looking at the door. Somehow I felt unwell. I attributed it to the lack of sleep, lack of light, and this long-ass winter that didn't seem to have an end. Also, this was my first night shift only with Sasha, and I did not want to do anything wrong. Plus, the storm outside was getting worse by the minute. When I called the electrician, he told me he will send someone by as soon as possible, after me pestering him for almost 5 minutes. He said flickering lights weren't anything I'm supposed to worry about. "Yeah, maybe. I have to check next time," she said, picking up her cell phone. We both sat in silence. Sasha was browsing Instagram, sometimes sending me a funny dog video if she found one. My hobby was playing Candy Crush, but I soon ran out of life, so I texted my boyfriend. I was sure he was asleep, but I still had to do something, and therefore sent him a grocery list for tomorrow. It was his turn to go shopping. When suddenly the buzzer from Mr. Kowalski's room went off again. We both looked at each other. None of us wanted to leave, but I got up, and Sasha did not move at all. "That's too close to Mrs. Stein's room. Can you go?" she asked, continuing to browse Instagram. I was way too nice to say anything. I opened the door and ran to Mr. Kowalski's room. Mr. Kowalski?" I asked him without turning on the lights. Maybe he wanted to go to the bathroom again. His prostate was a big problem for him. He refused to wear a diaper or have a pen in his bed. A man of principles and dignity. "Turn on the light, nurse," he said this time. "I can't see you." I rolled my eyes and turned on the light. "Make up your mind, Grandpa," I thought to myself. "What do you need, Mr. Kowalski?" I looked at him. "I do not want to be rude, but could you tell Mrs. Stein to talk quieter? People around here want to sleep," he said. I felt unwell again. Is she still not sleeping? Sasha really needs to start checking those pills. No problem, Mr. Kowalski, I said and walked over to Mrs. Stein's room. I left Mr. Kowalski's door open and the light was on. I was now at Mrs. Stein's door, which was right next to Mr. Kowalski's room. I put my ear on it to check if I can really hear something. Maybe Mr. Kowalski had a dream or he was imagining it. Never mind, she was still awake and was talking to someone. God damn. Mr. Kowalski had good ears for his age. My stomach felt like someone tied it with a rope and pulled on it. It made me don't want to move from where I was standing. I didn't want to go in, but that's what they were paying me for. So I pulled myself together, ignoring my uneasy feeling in my gut. Mrs. Stein, I said, opening the door. Why are you not sleeping yet? She kept talking to herself, not noticing me. Unfortunately, I did not understand what she was saying. I also couldn't see anything. It was pitch black in the room. The windows seemed to be covered with something. I searched for the light switch with my hand, only by touch. Mrs. Stein? I asked again. I still didn't understand what she was mumbling to herself, and how the hell did Mr. Kowalski hear her all the way from his room? I really had to stretch out my ears to get behind the meaning of her words. Where is Albert? Where is Albert? I finally identified her words. That's what she said again and again, like an all broken record, when my hand touched the light switch. There was someone standing in my Mrs. Stein's bed. A shadow. A shadow in the shape of a human. Dark, see-through body with no eyes, no mouth, long arms that were touching the face of Mrs. Stein. I couldn't even see her face. Her head was between the hands of that thing. I was so scared I couldn't move. I just stood there, my mouth open, my hands still touching the light switch as the shadow suddenly moved its head in my direction and the lights in the building shut off. My survival instinct kicked in and I bolted out the door. I ran into the hallway, closed the door to Mrs. Stein's room, and ran back towards Mr. Kowalski's room. I was in such a hurry I didn't pay attention that I fell to the ground and sprained my ankle. Thankfully, I fell nose first into Mr. Kowalski's room. What are you doing there? Mr. Kowalski asked. I closed the door behind me with my okay leg and crawled towards Mr. Kowalski's bed. I was so scared I wanted to hide under it. The storm outside suddenly got quiet. I couldn't hear any rain or tree branches hitting the window, and the darkness made everything worse. Shh! I shouted at Mr. Kowalski. He just looked at me in shock, but his facial expression changed when he illuminated my face with his flashlight. I sat there trying to order my thoughts, not able to catch my breath, holding my sprained ankle. I only now realized in how much pain I was. What happened? Is there someone out there? He asked me, quite worried. I still could not catch my breath. There's someone in Mrs. Stein's room. Or something. I don't know. What should I do? What should I do? I kept repeating the same sentence, still in shock from what happened. Nurse Green! Mr. Kowalski yelled out my name, and somehow it helped me snap out of it. I looked up to him. For a brief moment, he reminded me of my grandfather. He was so proud of me for choosing to become a nurse and help people that need helping. Mrs. Stein needed helping. We need to call help, he continued his sentence. Mr. Kowalski reached out his hand to me, and with his help, I pulled myself together, plus some extra help from Mr. Kowalski's bed frame. I got up on my healthy leg. There was a cane right next to his bed. Mr. Kowalski never used it. He always wanted the wheelchair, even if his doctor told him it would be good for him to move a bit on his own. She's still in that room, with that thing. I can't leave her alone. I'm her nurse. She needs me. It's my duty to help her and my job. I said to Mr. Kowalski. No, you need to call for help, He didn't agree, but I didn't listen. "Where are you going?" Mr. Kowalski asked me. "To Mrs. Stein," I said, moving back towards the hallway, snatching Mr. Kowalski's flashlight from him. "I think you should call someone for help. You're hurt," he called after me, but I didn't listen anymore. I was back before Mrs. Stein's room. My hands were shaking and my mouth was dry as if I was standing in the desert. I was scared. Who is in that room? Who is that shadow? Is it Albert? Was it death itself? Or am I going crazy because I'm too tired? I didn't want to ask myself any more questions. That patient may need my help. I opened the door like I was Clint Eastwood himself, fearless and pissed. In that moment, the light in the room came back on. The windows were fully open. It felt like I was standing inside a fridge. The shadow was not there anymore. I quickly looked around the room. My anxiety was suddenly gone as the adrenaline was rushing through my veins. Nobody was there. I heard footsteps in the hallway. "Maria?" It was Sasha. She stood in the doorway, worryingly looking inside. "Mr. Kowalski called me? What are you doing here and what happened to your leg?" I did not answer her. Instead, I walked over to Mrs. Stein's bed. She was lying in it. "Mrs. Stein?" I addressed her, but I was too late. No breath, no heartbeat. She was lying in her bed, with hot tears on her face and a photo of her husband Albert in her hand. "What happened?" Sasha asked. I did not know myself. "She's dead," I said. "But how?" "I don't know," I answered, not really wanting to know. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the outro. To the outro that is probably going to be way too long, so I better edit it down. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story, and hopefully this is something that is really important to me. You could give me feedback. I am trying to constantly make myself into a better storyteller, and your feedback would be very valuable to me, and I just want to know what works and what doesn't work. So do leave me a comment telling me what you liked and what you didn't like. I would also like to know, how do you enjoy the audio mixing? I know a fair few, I don't know them, but like I listen to a fair few people that read out stories, especially like scary stories, and the way they do it's pretty different from what I'm doing, or at least I like to think that. I am sort of experimenting with it. I'm trying to be a little bit different, and I'm trying to make it a little bit more intricate and more interesting for you, but I don't know if that is being appreciated. Maybe the simplistic approach to it is maybe better. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out, but I wouldn't know unless someone actually tells me. So do let me know if you like what I'm doing with the sound and with the music and with all the like sound effects and stuff. I would like to know, because I honestly don't know. I like it, but that doesn't mean that people actually appreciate that. Sorry for not posting for like 2 or 3 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks. I got sick over by the end of March, and then I was basically sick for like 2 weeks, and my voice was really shitty, and I didn't really feel like doing anything, honestly. So I just didn't. So I'm sorry that I didn't post anything, but now that I'm back to normal, here you go. Here you have it. Here you have another one. I will try to maintain a little bit, like a better upload schedule, but it's a bit complicated. I'm still trying to work out what's the best way of trying to maintain a regular upload schedule, like, because I'm just starting with this thing, so I am really experimenting and really trying to find something that works and it's really efficient and I can maintain. But anyway, at this point I'm just rambling, so let me wrap this up. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this short little scary story called The Shadow. I will, there are more short stories, not necessarily scary stories, coming up. And I hope that you are looking forward to it, because I am. I'm very, very passionate about this whole thing that I started. If you could, I know, and I hate doing this, but like, if you could like and share and subscribe, that would be great, because it actually shows me that, I don't know, people care, or that I'm not just speaking into the void, which we kind of all are, but, you know, it's just nice to know that there are actually people who enjoy what I am doing, I guess. It's just nice to know. You know, validation is it's overrated, but it's nice to have it, you know. My therapist, oh god, not here with the therapist. My therapist always says that you don't need external validation, but like, it's not bad to have it. So do leave me a like and share this with your friends or whatever, and subscribe. It's just nice to have that. So it's just a nice feeling, you know, whenever I get like a new subscriber or someone liked the video, or like left me a comment or whatnot. Anyway, that's all from me. This outro is way too long anyway, so I'm gonna go sleep now, because it's like almost 1:30 in the morning as I'm wrapping this up. So yeah, good night.